In 39 AD, a terrifying chill gripped Rome's heart. It wasn't the winter wind, but the paralyzing dread that every noble family felt as they realized tonight another daughter would vanish. Imagine a girl of 14, dressed for sleep, believing the world beyond her chamber was safe, only to hear the heavy rhythm of iron-shod boots marching toward her home. You were taught that being summoned by the emperor was the highest grace. No one mentioned it would happen without warning. No one said the Praetorians would invade your sanctuary as if they already held the deed to your life. And most importantly, no one spoke of the red-shrouded lantern they carried, a blood-colored signal placed directly at your front door. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if these forgotten nightmares of the past fascinate you, and hit that like button. Before we continue, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to know who is witnessing this history with us. In mere moments, your mother will whisper your name with a trembling voice, fearing any loud sound might provoke a divine curse. In mere moments, your father's face will crack under the strain of a fake smile. And in mere moments, you will face the reality every aristocrat denies. The Palatine Hill doesn't invite daughters, it consumes them. If you imagine Flavia's ordeal starts with this knock, you are mistaken. What awaits her behind the palace gates makes this terrifying abduction feel like a mercy. This isn't some fable, it was the night the Garden of Venus opened, a ritual so depraved that historians tried to erase its existence. Tell me in the comments once we reach the specific detail that unsettles you most. Let's begin. The first soul to encounter this nightmare is Flavia. Remember her name, because the events you are about to witness shaped the man who will decide her destiny. To comprehend how a person can decay internally and transform into a monster capable of swallowing an empire, we must return to the source. You must look at the bloodline that produced him and the trauma that broke him long before the world learned to scream his name. Caligula wasn't born of madness, he was born into radiance. He was the offspring of Germanicus, the golden hero of Rome, a man who could halt a mutiny with a glance or set a city's heart ablaze. The child should have inherited prestige, valor, and ethics. Instead, a toxic rot seeped into his spirit. His youth wasn't spent in quiet libraries or manicured gardens. It was forged on the empire's jagged frontier, in mud-streaked military camps smelling of rusted iron and the metallic tang of blood. He learned to navigate rows of scarred legionaries, the earth shaking beneath their hobnailed boots. The soldiers cherished the sight of their general's toddler in tiny uniform, dubbing him Caligula, Little Boot. It was a term of endearment that would eventually be linked to a legacy of gore. Even then, his internal compass warped. The harsh frontier taught him a singular truth. Power isn't a gift, it is a seizure, and once you grasp it, you never apologize for the way you swing it. That was the initial crack in his soul, and those fissures were destined to widen. The crushing blow arrived with Germanicus's suspicious passing. Suddenly, the favored child was a target. He watched in horror as his mother and siblings were banished, starved, and slaughtered one by one, not by a foreign army, but by the icy calculation of Emperor Tiberius. Then came Capri. Rome thought Tiberius was retiring in tranquility, but on that island, something predatory thrived behind closed doors. The perverted lessons Caligula mastered there are what Flavia will pay for in ways she cannot fathom. A mere youth, Caligula was forced to reside with the butcher of his family. Capri wasn't a sanctuary, it was a gold-plated tomb sealed by paranoia. For 6 agonizing years, he existed under the scrutiny of an emperor who trusted nobody and executed on a whim. There, Caligula absorbed a secondary, darker rule. To survive, you must grin at the man you intend to incinerate. He suppressed every sob, choked back every surge of fury, and knelt before his family's murderer. While he appeared perfectly submissive, the breaks in his psyche expanded until something freezing and vengeful filled the gaps. Thus, when Tiberius finally expired in 37 AD, and the Senate elevated the 24-year-old Caligula to the throne, the public erupted in joyous hysteria. A new era, a fresh prince, the son of Germanicus, had arrived to purge the corruption. Briefly, he succeeded. He liberated captives, burned the files of Tiberius's informants, abolished hated levies, and flooded the streets with currency and spectacles. Rome thought they were redeemed. But the man who will eventually hunt Flavia hadn't fully woken up. His shadow was only beginning to lengthen. That salvation was a facade. Near the conclusion of his first year, a fever struck so fiercely that the emperor lingered at the door's death. When he finally stood up, something essential had vanished. The boy who hid his malice on Capri no longer saw the point in hiding anything. Standing atop the Palatine, gazing at a city that deified him, Caligula realized a horrifying fact. At the summit of total power, there are no gods above, only prey below. The cheers of the mob and the shaking silence of the Senate didn't humble him, it fueled him. His sanity peeled away like dead skin, revealing the predator Capri had sculpted. Altruism curdled into obsession, justice rotted into sadism. Within his mind, a vision solidified. Noble women weren't citizens or humans, they were tools. The first instrument he intended to sharpen was waiting on a night Flavia didn't realize would end her world. This transition didn't hit Rome like a bolt of lightning. It seeped in like a plague, slow, muffled, and unstoppable. It was a venom moving under marble floors and into the homes of the elite, reaching those who felt untouchable. Somewhere in the city, Flavia's family heard that knock. The knock no one dared to answer, yet no one was permitted to ignore. It started with a messenger. The heralds didn't bring blades that afternoon. They brought scrolls bound in imperial purple, a color signifying either life or total erasure. Inside was a demand no father would dare refuse. Deliver your daughter, specifically the most beautiful, the most innocent, and the most politically useful. Families called it a distinction, yet they knew wearing perfume for this occasion was like dressing for a funeral. To reject him was treason. To comply was to hand your child to a wolf. The girls were taken to a hidden wing of the residence that Caligula, with sick irony, called the Garden of Venus. Flavia walked inside thinking she still possessed agency. She would be stripped of that delusion before dawn. Initially, it seemed like a dream: pink marble, silk tapestries, rare scents, and silent servants. The daughters of Rome entered thinking they were chosen for holy duties. But slowly the realization set in. The beauty was just the cage's paint. The real purpose of the garden, the horror hidden in the shadows, was waiting. The worst part was the pacing. Flavia would learn that the garden didn't shatter girls instantly. It unraveled them slowly enough for them to feel every thread snapping. The jewels they were forced to wear weren't finery. They were shackles of heavy gold, marking each girl as state-owned livestock. The translucent silks were worse, garments intended to reveal, not cover, reminding them their bodies were no longer their own. Their names were the first things Caligula deleted. Identity is dangerous, so he swapped names for numbers or humiliating slurs he whispered to himself. With every stolen name, the garden's grip tightened.
But the ultimate weapon wasn't the gold or the fear, it was the waiting. It was a psychological torture that left no bruises but hollowed the spirit. They never knew when the call would come. Tonight? Next month? Every second was a slow execution of the nerves. The sound of boots in the corridor made their hearts stop. Sleep became a memory. By the time Caligula actually arrived, the mental destruction was done. They were already broken spirits. When the summons finally came, it led to the emperor's nightly theater, the feasts. The girls were paraded before the elite like prize cattle, not social guests, but breathing decor. Caligula prowled among them with a butcher's eyes, loudly critiquing their bodies, mocking their dignity, and ranking them.
The same men who dictated Rome's laws by day were the same ones Caligula forced into his depravity by night. He didn't just want their bodies, he wanted their complicity, staining their hands with the same filth that coated his own. Shared guilt is a leash stronger than iron, and soon the empire's elite were chained to him by a vow of silence they could never break. But the humiliation went deeper. Families were commanded to show gratitude for their own destruction. Imagine a father forced to host a lavish feast to celebrate the night his daughter was defiled. They were made to toast to their child's honor while swallowing their own horror like slow-acting poison. On the Palatine Hill, gratitude was simply the masked despair war to stay alive. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss these deep dives into the darker side of our past. Under this regime, surveillance tightened into a noose. No corner offered sanctuary. Slaves, guards, and invisible spies acted as the emperor's eyes. Even a muffled sob in the dead of night could be reported as an act of treason. Inside the Garden of Venus, humanity was scraped away layer by layer until nothing remained but trembling flesh and the haunting echo of approaching footsteps. By 40 AD, the palace air was toxic enough to suffocate the soul. The girls who arrived with vibrant spirits were now skeletal phantoms drifting through cold corridors. Many fell into a catatonic silence, their minds retreating into the only fortress Caligula couldn't breach. Doctors today would call it dissociation, the soul detaching from the body as a final defense mechanism. The court tried to suppress a truth far darker. The suicides had begun. Once the first girl surrendered, the floodgates opened. Some broke, others shattered completely. Flavia found herself in the gray middle, too terrified to end it, yet too broken to truly be alive. While servants whispered of 6 confirmed deaths, everyone knew that number was a lie designed to protect the palace's reputation. The real count was buried beneath marble floors and imperial secrecy. Flavia began to realize that surviving might be the cruelest punishment of all. Death, once their greatest fear, became the only horizon offering peace, a final act of sovereignty in a world where they owned nothing, not even their names. Some used shards of broken vases to open their veins. Others fashioned nooses from the very silks meant to mock them. Some simply walked to the high balconies and stepped into the air, letting gravity provide the mercy their emperor denied. For these women, the cold embrace of the grave was kinder than Caligula's touch. Yet the emperor wasn't finished. In his delusion of godhood, he invented a psychological torment that targeted the girls through those they loved most. He allowed parents to visit, not for comfort, but for a twisted performance. The girls were painted with cosmetics to hide bruises, perfumed to mask the smell of the dungeons, and forced to lie through forced smiles. The parents, watched by unblinking centurions, had to pretend this was a joyous reunion. If a mother's voice trembled, she was executed. If a daughter let the mask slip, her entire bloodline paid the price.
Everyone was an actor in a grotesque theater, and the architect of their agony watched from the front row with predatory satisfaction. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from as we approach the final explosive moments of Caligula's reign. Eventually, Caligula made the fatal error every tyrant commits. He violated women who carried the swords. Violating women wasn't enough. He needed to castrate the dignity of Rome's warriors. He mocked the commanders of the Praetorian Guard, forcing battle-hardened veterans to use vulgar, demeaning passwords in front of their men. Among them was Cassius Chaerea, a hero who had served under Germanicus. Caligula's relentless mockery of Chaerea's perceived softness transformed a loyal soldier into a lethal conspirator. The hatred mutated into a matter of survival. Caligula was no longer a leader. He was a malignant tumor devouring the state. On January 24, 41 AD, the pressure reached its breaking point. During the Palatine Games, Caligula slipped into a dim, underground stone corridor called the Cryptoporticus to bathe. He entered believing he was an immortal god. He would never walk out. Chaerea and the conspirators blocked his path. There were no speeches or trials, only the sound of steel. The first blade shattered his larynx, silencing the man who demanded worship. Then came the frenzy. Over 30 stab wounds tore into him. The self-proclaimed Jupiter of Rome collapsed into the dirt, pleading and dying like the terrified mortal he had always been. But for the girls in the Garden of Venus, the nightmare didn't end with his heartbeat. They heard the screams, the clashing metal, and the thunder of boots. They huddled in the dark, wondering if this was liberation or a new form of doom. When the silence finally fell, a strange, empty silence, none dared move. They knew in Rome, when one monster falls, a worse one often rises. They were right to be afraid. Caligula's death triggered a bloodbath. His Germanic bodyguards, fueled by rage, transformed the palace into a slaughterhouse, cutting down anyone in their path. The garden became a death trap. Some fled through glass-littered halls. Others barricaded their doors, waiting to see if the next hand to touch the handle would bring life or death. Hours later, an unlikely figure was dragged from behind a palace curtain. Claudius, Caligula's trembling uncle. Thrust onto the throne, Claudius realized a terrifying truth. If the public learned the full extent of the Garden of Venus and the complicity of the elite, the empire would fracture. He chose a path darker than silence. For the survivors, there was no justice, only a transaction. The palace returned the girls to their families, draped in gold and massive dowries meant to buy their silence. The unspoken command was clear: forget. Forget the daughters Rome fed to a false god. No trials were held, no accomplices were punished. Rome simply folded the truth into the shadows. The girls returned to their villas as walking corpses, bodies that breathed, but souls that had died on the Palatine Hill. In a society that valued a woman's purity above her life, these victims were treated like shameful relics. Most never married. They were hidden in distant wings of estates, seen only by servants. Their trauma was a lifelong sentence. A hand on a shoulder triggered a panic attack. A loud noise caused a collapse. Physical walls were gone, but the prison in their minds had no key. Rome looked away because it was easier to blame the victims than to confront its own rotting foundation. Caligula wasn't an accident. He was a product of a system that concentrated absolute power in the hands of one man with no limits. He proved how thin the line is between civilization and savagery. That line was drawn on the broken bodies of girls like Flavia. Rome built monuments that lasted millennia, but it failed in its simplest duty, protecting the vulnerable from the predators at the top. This story is a warning. A nation can reach the peak of power, but if it discards human dignity, its legacy is written in shame. History is written by victors, but the shadows of the erased remain in the margins. We, centuries later, must decide to look at those shadows. Evil doesn't always arrive with fire. Sometimes it wears a crown and hides behind the silence of good men. If this story moved you, don't let the silence win. Make sure to subscribe for more untold truths, and thank you for watching.